Hello and welcome to this session that we've titled The Future of Multi-Carrier Shipping Systems Beyond the Shipping Label. My name is Michael Levins and I'm Group Editorial Director for Peerless Media Supply Chain Group, which of course includes Logistics Management Magazine, and I'll be your moderator for this session that's being brought to you by Logistyx. It's safe to say that nearly every logistics professional attending today's session is feeling the pressures that digital commerce has introduced into their operations. Indeed, e-commerce has brought with it both increased opportunity and increased complexity, and at levels we've never really seen before. Now today, we're all working to manage omni-channel order fulfillment while establishing a more efficient distribution and transportation network strategy to accommodate smoother inbound flow as well as next day or even sometimes same day delivery windows. Now, to do this successfully, retailers, suppliers, and manufacturers must innovate, adapt, and evolve or get edged out of their market positions. And with these mounting pressures, a question remains: will the shipping solution that you currently have in place today meet emerging delivery and customer service trends over the next 5 years? Great question, very important for any company striving to maintain a competitive edge. Well, today we're going to take a look at what a future-ready multi-carrier shipping platform looks like, and we're also going to explore the key trends shaping supply chain delivery and how they're influencing shipping system requirements. And some of those include omni-channel delivery, of course, the need to simplify the procurement of transportation services, the growing need for control tower capabilities and seamless analytics. And of course, we're going to introduce today the blockchain and how this emerging technology is going to make an impact on transportation management as we know it today. Now, to shed more light on what the multi-carrier shipping system is going to look like, we're joined by Ken Fleming, and Ken is COO of Logistyx Technologies. Now, Ken oversees sales, product, and services enhancements and innovations at Logistyx, and of course, he leads a team in charge of product development. Ken knows his stuff. It's going to be a terrific session. Now, just a quick reminder before Ken gets us started, there's going to be a Q&A session following his presentation, so please don't hesitate to submit your questions as Ken goes through his slides today. We're going to get to as many as we can in the time allowed, but if we don't get to your question during today's session, that question is going to be captured and emailed over to Ken, and he'll be able to answer you via email. So, Ken, without any further ado, let's get things rolling.
Michael, good afternoon and good morning. It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you for that great introduction. Before I kick it off and we get into the details with respect to omnichannel and e-commerce, one of the things that I'd like to do for the audience today is kind of set the stage for a couple of things, make sure we're all on the same level playing field with respect to key drivers within the industry around the initiatives that you're describing, but also that we understand where the technology of multi-carrier shipping systems fits into the landscape of what we often find confusing is understanding what's the true definition of a transportation management system. And there are differences, and I think that as companies are deciding what's the right solution for me and where I'm going to go to help solve my business challenges, focusing on the right kind of products and services to solve your challenges is just as critical as to how those products are going to do that. So I'm going to spend the first few minutes or so just kind of setting the level playing field before I get into the real context of the discussion of where multi-carrier shipping systems are coming to play and how they're going to move forward based on the topics that we've highlighted. So without further ado, let me kick it off and introduce a little bit about the industry as a whole. Now, when we look at the impact of global e-commerce, specifically on the parcel market, in Michael's introduction, he was absolutely spot on. The drivers associated with what's happening in our industry are really driven by the consumers and consumer demand for how they shop, when they shop, and when they expect their products to be delivered. And I look back to just thinking not that far back, but the early 2000s when we all thought, oh, this e-commerce thing, is it really going to take off, yes or no? And the reality is that it was. Maybe not all of us believed it, but it certainly has. And the response now is not just within our own local markets, but is becoming a huge global factor. In the slide that we're looking at here, you're looking at not just the shift within e-commerce, but where it is actually happening. And I think this just reflects exactly what we expect to, what we're responding to and what our customers are responding to within the whole aspect of the parcel market. Now, when we talk about types of transportation management systems and multi-carrier shipping systems, you'll hear me today say a lot about Parcel, but I promise you I'm going to expand beyond that and we'll address the bigger market, but obviously Parcel will be a big focus based on the shift towards e-commerce fulfillment. If we look at some of the key drivers, with respect to what's happening in the international market, I like to refer to this graph that you're looking at as the modern spice route. So from yesteryear to today, we're looking at borderless trade. There's nothing, I live in the Netherlands, we don't even know that I'm there right now doing this presentation. But within the Netherlands, I'm constantly shopping online, and my family does it. We still order products from back home in the United States, and we have them shipped to us here as if it is nothing. We don't worry about how we're going to process it or what the import processes are, because it's all handled from us. And we shop, whether I'm shopping from Amazon UK, Amazon Netherlands, or Amazon United States, or any other website worldwide, I'm able to do that fulfillment and have it delivered to me anywhere in the world. And that really is how the world is responding and retailers are responding to customer demands. I have products to sell. I want to sell them to anybody in the world that may want my products, but I need to be able to understand that fulfillment and shipping systems are able to support me in those transactions when I do that. And if you look at what's happening, based on these charts, you're seeing a clear growth with respect to the demand from international markets and growth within e-commerce. Now, what was interesting is we did a study, and the source of this information is a study that we did with Ohio State University. And it looks at it from the shipper's perspective of concerns within their organization and how they are going to approach focusing their organization, or the things that they want to focus on, within their organization. Now, I want to highlight a few of these things, right? So first of all, if we look at it and say, what are the critical or important factors? This was a summary that Ohio State did as a part of this research. And it says that they felt that transportation management, supply chain visibility, and warehouse manufacturing warehouse management were all critical or important factors. And you get an idea here percentage-wise as to what they felt that they should be focusing on as a connection into their manufacturing processes. But if you notice what they responded to directly after that, it wasn't about a process as it was about a vertical market or a market strategy such as omni-channel or e-commerce fulfillment or retail store operations. I view that all 6 of those items are all driving what's happening in the multi-carrier shipping systems market, right? And we'll be able to talk a bit about more of how that's being impacted, how our customers are seeing that that's being used in the industry today, how to solve their challenges of each of these things through a technology advantage. Okay, so as I mentioned in the introduction, one of the things that I wanted to help our audience today understand is that there are different types of transportation management systems. And I borrowed this slide from our friends at the Gartner Group with respect to trying to understand the definition. And I think it's critical for the audience to understand that when you're trying to make a decision of what types of technology are going to solve your business problems today, you define what your business problems are, but you have to understand what technologies are available in different segments so that you choose the right kind of solution to solve the right business problem. And one of the challenges that we have within transportation management systems are there's multiple definitions. And depending on who you ask, whether it's Logistyx Technologies, whether it's other vendors, whether it's different software companies, the Gartner Group, or any other organization that's monitoring this market, any idea what the different actual transportation management system is. So one of the things that I often advise clients to do this kind of a process that allows them to evaluate what they're looking for, what business problems they're solving, identify what types of solutions are available for them, and as a result, they can zoom in to identify who are the experts in that space that can really help them achieve their objectives. I could tell you all a short story of a client that we were meeting with that started out thinking they were looking for one type of TMS system and brought in an external consulting company to evaluate what they were looking for, only to find that they were looking in the wrong spot. And while the requirements and the issues that they were trying to solve did not change, by presenting it to a different group of vendors that were able to solve it, it changed drastically their approach of how to solve their problems, and not just the speed of how they were going to address it, but what kind of implementation methodologies they were going to use, what kind of technology would solve the problem, and how they would go about it. They easily could have bought the wrong type of solution and spent easily a year, 2 years trying to figure out how to make the wrong thing work within their environment. So I think it's very important for organizations to go through this process in some way. So I'm just borrowing this slide from Gartner Group to kind of give you an example of this for a moment. Now, if you follow the Gartner Group, for example, we all hear about this great report that they refer to called the Magic Quadrant. And it's a very, very good report with respect to understanding various markets that they pay attention to. And if you read these Magic Quadrant reports, it'll tell you, for example, who's strong in one segment of an industry or another, who is a good global player versus who's a very specific regional player. So it provides an organization with a lot of information. But when you're reading those specific to transportation management systems, it's important to understand which segment the Gartner Group is actually focusing on when they do that report. And this is an actual slide from one of the Gartner reports. And what you're looking at here is that the focus on where the Magic Quadrant report comes across is for those organizations that are looking for multimodal domestic transportation management systems that are either shippers or third-party logistics providers. You would find that report to be very useful. And the information regarding vendors and who provides what kind of solutions in that space will be incredibly helpful. Now, if we apply it to what's happening within the e-commerce space, when we're looking at multi-carrier shipping systems, and in particular, if you were to think of Parcel as a modality, then we're looking at a very different spot. And what I've done in my own way here is to highlight in a blue box where the focus occurs for that. So if we look to others to give us guidance, we need to make sure that we're focusing on the right kind of information to get to the right kind of solution set. Now, what's great about what Gartner did is they've actually been producing a series of reports around the segment that I've highlighted around parcel management. It's identified as multi-carrier shipping systems. And so there's some incredibly useful information that you can get from them with respect to what kind of vendors and what kind of solutions there are out there to help you solve your business problems. But my key point here is make sure you're identifying the right information that'll guide you to identify how to solve the problems, rather than assuming that, for example, whether a standard industry report can give you the right appropriate guidance. Now, where this leads me to is, well, what's the definition of that parcel management? What does a TMS system in that space need to look like? Now, so that I don't come across as being biased with my own organization and what we do, I thought I'd be neutral and stick with our friends at Gartner. And what I have here is what Gartner has defined as common parcel capabilities. So when they report and review companies in that segment I just described, they talk about it from the perspective of these are the core functions that you should be expecting companies in this space to be able to address for you. Procurement and bid optimization. And we'll talk a bit more about some of these things in a moment in the context of the topic today. Contract management, parcel consolidation, parcel optimization, label and document creation, parcel execution, real-time visibility, parcel freight payments, and the financial aspects of freight audit, reporting and analytics, and mobile solutions. So these are the core things that, in their view, they see that most companies that want to be leaders in this space have to be addressing or providing in order to serve this segment, this market segment. So that's the context that I want to kind of set the stage for you today as we move into this presentation now as to what am I really talking about and what specifically are we focusing on when we talk about TMS or a multi-carrier shipping system, how it's going to address the growth and the demands that are occurring within e-commerce and omnichannel. It really brings us to the point where I could now say we can start. So as you saw within the agenda, we're going to talk about 5 things today. First, we'll talk a little bit about omnichannel delivery, right? What's controlling shipping delivery process across an extended enterprise, drop shipping, ship from store, the issues that are being addressed by organizations like ourselves and others that are companies that are trying to, if you like, deliver the solution that's best for their customer. And whether or not a customer is buying a product that wants 2-hour delivery where the inventory is in a store and you want it delivered, or it's in a warehouse, or if it's in an e-commerce shipment center that's halfway across the world. Having visibility to their entire inventory to make the right decision on behalf of the consumer they're selling to. Expanding delivery services. And this kind of expands on the modern spice routes with respect to globalization of customers and how we serve them all. And I've got a couple of really good case studies on this, as well as some personal experience I will share in a moment. From the procurement process, the need to simplify the procurement of transportation services. And what I think of here is not just how we work with our carriers and delivery services today, but how do we extend that to deliver with same-day delivery or rush courier services anywhere in the world so that we ensure that we're covering last-mile delivery as effectively as possible. We never want to be able to say, I'd love to be able to sell you this, but I can't because I don't know how to get it to you in that particular region of the country or in the world. Control tower capabilities. I talk a lot about control towers, and I get asked to come in and do various speeches on what is a control tower. And I think fundamentally that's where a lot of challenges come into play. And what I would describe today that we're going to focus on is what control tower capabilities exist within the context of multi-carrier shipping. I do not want to have you take away from this discussion today that this is not a control tower, or what I'm saying is not a control tower, because from a supply chain control tower perspective, it is a version of control tower with a very different scope and breadth. So as I talk about it today, we'll focus in on as to how it applies to multi-carrier shipping, and then hopefully I can stretch that into how that would then connect into a more specific or strategic supply chain control tower. The blockchain, I think this has now become a de facto standard, is that everybody has to put blockchain on a presentation because everybody wants to know what it is. And I go back and think maybe a couple of years ago, maybe even longer now, I have to, times go by so fast. And I go, remember when we used to say big data and it was on every slide because we had to talk about it, but we weren't really sure what it is. Well, hopefully I'm going to demystify a little bit about that for you today, but I'm going to show you what we're doing and how we think about it, what the industry is considering about it, and then what's really there. So let's see how well we do as we walk through the presentation. So first up, omnichannel. So let's start with omnichannel. All right. When we talk about omnichannel, I think the first perspective we have to take a look at is what does it really mean and why do we actually need it? And if we take a look at it from retail, one of the key driving factors of this is the change in how we shop. Now, I'm not sure which one of the two categories on the right that I am. Maybe I'm sitting right on the border. I like to think of myself as that I behave and act, and maybe that's how I feel young. So I think and act like the millennial segment. but I'm still one of those people that likes to be in the store to take a look and feel before I purchase. But the reality is our world is changing, and it's changing not just within the generations, but how each of these generations act and behave on a global basis. And what retailers are trying to do is to ensure that they continue to appeal to all of them. So what this means is they're dealing with the fact that they need to have both an online and in-store presence and the ability to do fulfillment based on the buying trends associated with each of these groups. So let's focus in a little bit on what this really means and how we would behave in this environment with respect to shipping systems. So I have a little graph here that shows not just the consumer, but the different processes that have to take place and then the impact on an organization. So our consumer has a choice, whether it's one of the generations on the left or one of the generations on the right. Whether I walk into the store and I try to buy the product and it's available and it's not and I walk out, or whether I go online, I order it, but I'd like to get it that day, and if one of the shipping options is not available, I can still go to the store to pick it up. The bottom line is, I as a consumer want choice, and retailers are trying to respond to that choice as it changes across each of the generations. Now, quick story on this is that I have twin boys that wanted to go shopping to get new shoes for school this year, and we go into the shoe retail store, and one of the boys found the exact pair of shoes that he wanted in the exact size that they wanted. The other boy found the exact shoes, but they didn't have their size. And when I asked, well, do you have them available in another store? They didn't know. When I asked if I could get them online, they didn't know. The response from this particular retailer was, well, if you wait a minute, the manager can go onto our website and see if we have them available and we can have them delivered to your house. Well, me being who I am, I immediately said, well, I can do that at home. Thank you very much. I'm out of here. And I left. I went home and I placed the order online. The point is that the store in this particular case hadn't gone through a strategy that understood how to address me as a consumer. Can I look up the inventory and find out it's available at the next store down the street? Can I find out that it's available online? And if so, just place the order so while I'm at the store, I've bought both pairs and I've gone home and one's going to be delivered to my requirements. Versus if I'd gone home and not bought those shoes, or if I'd gone to another store and not bought the shoes from the retailer I was working with, but from another retailer, they've really lost an opportunity. So what retail organizations are doing is trying to respond to that. And to respond to it, there's two key factors they have to understand very clearly. One, how do you integrate the online purchasing system so that when I go online, I search for the product and I have choice with how I want that product delivered to me, same day delivery, overnight, or if I'm willing to wait a few days and maybe get free delivery. But that is to give me the choice with respect to how urgently I feel I want that product. When we do that, what's the impact to the fulfillment process of how I have to pick the products from my warehouse and package them for distribution? Companies that have automated their warehouse management applications and have a specific process, how do they react to my on-demand requirement of wanting those shoes within 2 hours? Can they go into the warehouse and find them, or do they have to wait for their existing warehouse management process to run to be able to fulfill that? And then how does the actual shipping back-end process change? Do they have to do, and how they work with particular carriers to ensure that they're responding to my needs? So integration to global visibility within their stores, warehouses, and distribution centers, understanding how to do fulfillment, understanding how they can fulfill using different carriers and services and different service levels are all critical factors that they have to weigh in choosing what kind of solutions to work with. And the key for them to implement any process is to ensure that all those systems and applications I just highlighted are working hand in hand so that we don't have any hiccups or processes when we're doing fulfillment. Now, another one I like to point out while we're on this topic is to focus on from where is it best to fulfill to a consumer that shops from home, right? Part of Omnichannel says, if I live close to a store, or if I live close to a warehouse, or even a supplier from the perspective of drop shipping, doesn't it make sense to deliver from the closest point of fulfillment to reduce my shipping costs? Well, that's another factor that we have to consider when we're taking a look at omnichannel and how that impacts not just how we treat our consumers, but how we are working within our business processes. If I move to what the impact is from a manufacturer on omnichannel, well, there's a few different things to think about, right? Manufacturers are looking at the convergence of the physical and digital supply chain and how they collaborate with their retail partners. And I've got a couple of examples to talk about in a few segments. I think one of the times I've spoken about these topics and before, somebody says, Ken, you know, there's a lot of talk about retail, but what about us manufacturers? So in the automotive industry, one of the big challenges that they've come with is that if you look at what happens in the after parts, the parts delivery after sale of product, right? Manufacturers are trying to say that rather, if a consumer wants to buy that product, why can't they buy that directly from the manufacturer themselves? So there's a project, for example, with Castrol and Bosch that they're trying to open that up and make sure that their products get delivered directly to you and I if we buy them off the internet. But to do that, we have all these middle players that help do that in the middle. Well, as a part of that process, it increased costs, it creates complexity within supply chain and delivery, and it has many people involved that doesn't allow Castrol and Bosch, for example, to understand what's actually happening with their customers, with their products in the market, because they're totally removed from the process. So through Omnichannel and implementing their own web presence to the market, they're now able to be having a much more informed decision within their customers and market. And so you never would think that you would be going on to Castrol.com to actually make a purchase, but that's the kind of thing that you're going to be able to see. Another area of manufacturing is something that I find really fascinating, if you've ever seen this, is the idea of 3D printing. I remember when they first came out and my kids at their school were working on things and being able to generate, small sample toys and things over a printer. But the stuff that we're able to see produced now is just astonishing, whether it's manufactured from materials like cement, plastics, nylons, all kinds of different source materials can be 3D printed now. So what does this mean? Well, this means that manufacturers are now determining that they can print spare parts on demand rather than having to store inventories in warehouses of spare parts to say, honor the support of the life cycle of a refrigerator for a 7-year period. So I bought it, and within 7 years, if something breaks, I might need a widget or a gasket replaced, whatever the case may be. And manufacturers have stored inventory of these products and spare parts, knowing that they want to be able to service us as customers and have their products back fulfilled right away. Well, those lead to large inventory counts that may or may not be used, and buying patterns that often leave a manufacturer with heavy costs in the back end of their inventory. Now, how do you deal with that? Well, with the advent of 3D print on demand, why print on your own warehouse and ship all over the world? Why not print closer to the destination of the product? So if a company that produces for example, a dishwasher, and that dishwasher is broken in the Netherlands versus the United States, why would I print the part in one country and ship to both? Why not print the part right in the Netherlands? Why not print the part right in the state or even in the same city where I need to fulfill it? And what have I done? I've reduced my supply chain footprint. My product is closer to where it's going to be needed. And as a result, I've reduced my total cost of distribution. It's absolutely brilliant. And the number of manufacturing companies that are looking at this as a strategic initiative is outstanding. But it's not just enough to think about 3D print. It's if I start printing them on a line item per unit basis, how am I going to deliver it via shipments? And then you can imagine it drives parcel volume. So moving on and talking a little bit more about delivery services. If we think of delivery services, I just want to highlight a few things for our audience. First is what's changing. Well, a few things are changing. Pickup sites are being introduced. The idea of how do I keep my audience in brick and mortar coming to my stores and seeing what I've got available in the store if I'm going to deliver right to their house. And by putting pickup sites in stores or in other areas of conveniences such as banks, areas where they know they're going to get our attention, it kind of makes sense. And companies like Amazon, UPS, and FedEx have all moved to this pickup site type process. But it's not just for the carriers and the distributors to be doing this. And I've just highlighted here a few examples of retailers, and in this particular case, Whole Foods, surprise, surprise, being acquired by Amazon, that they have gone with this approach. But other organizations like Walgreens and Kroger and many more that I could have listed if I had a bigger slide area have all got the exact same strategies, right? By offering shipping capabilities in store, it creates a more active audience to come into the brick and mortar operation, and it links the generations that we started with from the very beginning. So initiative number one is ensuring that shipping systems have the ability and are adapted to working with pickup sites. Second is looking for more delivery service. Now, if I look at what's changing is we need more options for delivery. Why? Because we're moving more volume, and not all carriers can do everything to everybody. All right. From a U.S. perspective, the big three, UPS, FedEx, and the USPS, cover a significant part of the volume of what has to be delivered. But on a worldwide basis, we need to work with others. And even in the U.S., when we're looking at same-day courier service, rush services, we start to add organizations such as Deliv or DPD in Europe or DHL. How do we work with LTL delivery versus parcel delivery? And when is that impacted? Well, let me advance to the next one to give you a real-life example of when that would kick in. When does LTL, right, or less than truckload become a part of last mile, right? And in the picture here, we see a graphic of an LTL carrier delivering a refrigerator to a home. It was bought off the internet, right? We went to a website, purchased a new refrigerator, said we'd like it delivered, and we want it delivered and installed. And that's great. But who's going to do that? It's not a parcel function to do that. I like to refer to this as bigger than parcel. So the behavior is identical e-commerce behavior as parcel delivery. The only difference is the definition of the parcel here has changed. And it requires a different type of carrier, a less than truckload carrier, to deliver. Now, let me give you a real life story with respect to this for me. Now, back to my twin boys who are growing like weeds for a moment. I had to get them new bicycles yet again. And as I did it, I went online and I ordered the bicycles off the internet, right? The option was that they were going to deliver them. And when they arrived, it came through a last mile delivery, an LTL carrier. They opened up the back of the truck and out came two boxes. Those boxes had the bikes. The bikes were not assembled. The LTL carrier assembled the bicycles for me, took all the package away, and put them in my garage. And when my kids got home, I said, guys, look what Dad did. I've been building these things all day, right? But the key point I want to emphasize for you all right now is this is just an extension of what's happening from e-commerce and parcel. The only change here is the definition of a parcel is changed based on its size and the complexity of the product. So a big factor with respect to delivery options are it's more than parcel. Back to my definition at the beginning and how to evaluate the right solutions. Even though we're talking about that parcel segment, parcel becomes LTL when you consolidate parcels and move towards palletization. It becomes more when you do drop ship or bulk break shipments into a different market. And it becomes more when you're dealing with bigger than parcel type shipments. So consideration for solutions have to include this as well. On the procurement side of things, very quickly, the kind of thing that you look for within procurement is, do I understand how I'm going to manage my contracts? And in particular, how am I managing my rates that I have with my different carriers? Is it easy for me to do it? How complicated is it to do it? And every carrier has a different format of how rates are produced and how we try to interpret them and use them. And so from a shipping perspective, we need to look for solutions that have the ability to bring those contracts in and allow us to understand them and utilize them in a way that doesn't interfere with our ability to run our operations. And in particular, rate management's a big thing, especially when you consider that contract rates with respect to carriers and services on a worldwide basis change all the time. Another factor to consider is what I refer to as closed user group bidding. When you know the carriers that you're working with and you have a special shipment and you're saying, who could do this best for me at this time? So it kind of deals with that abnormal shipping request, but you still want to use a known carrier to deliver. Does the application you're looking for allow you to do that? And then the ability to do simulation. What happens next year? What's the impact to my business if my carrier rates are going to go up by 10%? Well, I could take a guess, but wouldn't it be much better if I knew, compared to the shipping volume I did last year, that I now know a 10% increase will impact my business by X, and be able to analyze that on a per line item basis, per business unit basis, so that I can see the net impact to my organization. These are key factors that we're actually seeing in use today, right? The one that we will see that's kind of a combination of extended delivery options and procurement is when we move outside of closed user group bidding and we want to be able to find market-based fulfillment where we're saying, I don't know the carriers, I need to find somebody. Is there anybody in this area that has the ability to deliver on my behalf? And in that particular case, is the connection from multi-carrier shippings to open carrier marketplaces. And there's hundreds upon hundreds of them popping up all over the country in North America and worldwide. Let's move on to this control tower topic and see how well I can do of kind of simplifying this from a shipping perspective versus a supply chain perspective. The easiest thing that I can do is to say, let's take a look at it from what I will call simplified components. Well, we capture data, and that data provides us with information that we want to analyze. When we analyze it, we want it to tell us something in the end, whether it's produced in a report in a dashboard. I think those are four simple components. It doesn't really matter what technology we're using or any other company's using to do that, but it has to have those four core capabilities. But let's zoom in a little bit about how those core capabilities are required to support us on multi-carrier shipping. So first, shipping information. We need to know what we shipped. We need to know the delivery information. If I shipped it and I wanted it 2 days overnight, I need to know that to ensure that if that's what actually happened, that's the service I paid for, did it happen? And if not, how am I going to adjust for that in working with my carrier? So I need to know shipment information, delivery information, cost information, and all that's the collection of data. When I apply the analytics footprint to it, I'm looking at several key things. I need to understand and track events, things that have happened. Well, I'll argue that there's another point of view. What if something didn't happen, right? So think of the last time that we've ordered something off the internet, and how many times did we ping the carrier site saying, where is it, where is it, where is it, where is it, right? I'm a little different. I just want to know if it's going to arrive on time, and I'd rather they inform me when it didn't, right? So the lack of an event occurring is also an alert that says it should have been at the warehouse by now, but it's not. So why not let me know something's happened and I can investigate, or I can be proactive with my clients to resolve the issue. So things in analytics have to involve events, triggers, the implementation of our own business rules and the ability to adapt, utilizing artificial intelligence to help us think smarter, and eventually leaning to machine learning so that through repetitive action that the technology itself understands how to apply our business rules and use artificial intelligence that the machines are making the recommendations for us of how to better our processes or inform our consumers of something that's gone wrong within the supply chain. Reports, pretty well the same thing. They're focused on two things: performance, how well are we doing, and financially, are we doing it in a financially sound manner? And to do that, I want to be able to see things at a line item, product level, shipment level, carrier level. Basically, let me see the data any way I want to see it. And the same is true of dashboards. It's all about visibility, but I want visibility from a customer's perspective, a management's perspective, a department's perspective. Any way I want to see it, I want to be able to tune those dashboards to reflect how my data is analyzed and tells me what's happening in my organization. That, simply put, is a control tower for multi-carrier shipping. Now, the evolution of what we plan to do with this is that it really leads to predictive analytics. And I've just done a simplified way of using this slide from Gartner here on the 4 stages, right? I'm collecting information. I need to optimize that. I want to have descriptive of what happened. Well, there goes my, when I talk about my events. Why did it happen? Triggers. I want to do some sort of diagnostics. What will happen? Be predictive about it. Again, missing data is just important as data. And then how can I make it happen is basically, how do I solve the problem as it's happening without anyone noticing? That's what I believe you'll see become more and more valuable as a part of what's happening inside control tower capabilities. And last, because I promised to talk about it, is the blockchain. And first, before we do this, is that I get, I think I was presenting at Gartner conference in Phoenix this year in May. And what was really interesting is that I on the agenda was for me to talk about blockchain, but I can't even count. I would have said maybe 20, 30 different presentations all talking about blockchain at Gartner. And by the time I got up on stage, I said, blockchain, what more can I say? And I actually sat down because I felt everybody had heard it all. But maybe that wasn't being fair to me, and let's focus on how it applies to us now. So what is it, right? I think the most common thing is we hear about it from the perspective of a Bitcoin-type transaction, but let's talk about specifically what it's attempting to do, right? And I think it's very, very simple definition, right? But we are creating information, and that information has a historical perspective to it. And as information and data changes how it's constructed and what it's containing with respect to who owns the information or who's updating that information is all tracked in a way that it has a historical perspective that's informative to all players. I think it's pretty simple, right? When I look at it from the perspective of the hype curve, the industry itself believes that we're going to see smart contracts used starting in 2018 and sophisticated applications available by 2020. Well, what does that really mean, especially for us? Right? Well, let's highlight a few things for a moment. One is, the belief is we'll be able to streamline data flows, sharing of data from a shipper to a carrier, having visibility of shipment status, understanding the financial information when it moves from one carrier to another carrier, the responsibility of the movement of hazardous material goods and the documentation associated with those goods, the movement of the information between players within the supply chain, whether it's freight forwarders, brokers, or the carriers themselves, streamlining those data flows, utilization of smart contracts, a trusted payment process, improvements of supply chain visibility, reducing carrier compliance costs, and creating a standard for emerging carrier services to simplify multi-carrier capabilities. That's the things that we believe we will see as benefits. So where do we stand today? Well, I would argue that companies like Logistyx are already doing it. But where do we do it? We do it inside our 4 walls. The way that Logistyx works with all of the carrier partners we have today, over 5,000 different services, we do it in a standard way, and we track all the information I'm sharing with you right now. But if we open that up to others, then we have to do it in a standard way. And that's where the development of blockchain will go. So to do that, Blockchain and Transport Alliance was created. There are several members of companies that are in there, including Logistyx. many logistics software companies, many logistics carriers, and associations are all working together to understand what it is, how we're going to work, and how we're going to implement it. So it's not just about the technology, but it's how we're going to collaborate. And I think back and I go, geez, I remember this from before. It reminds me of the EDI days where we started with communications, and then we need standards of data and how we're going to go work. So is blockchain really a new form of EDI? Maybe I've been around too long to say it is, and others will tell me that we're leapfrogging it, but I just think it's a variation of it. So that's my discussion for today. I'd like to turn things back over to Michael. Michael, I'm seeing some questions come in, but I'll leave it to you to help me weed through these and see where we go.
Absolutely, Ken. Great job today. Absolutely terrific job, and I couldn't agree more on just the hype cycle that's going on with blockchain. I think you did a terrific job of just really putting it into context. And as Ken mentioned, we do have a number of questions rolling in right now. I'm going to thank everybody for those. Ken, you sparked a lot of interest today. It was just really, really well done. So let's get to a couple questions here that keep rolling in. And again, we're going to be up against it here in a few minutes, so I can get to a few questions here. If we do not get to your question today, we're going to capture that question and we're going to move it over to Ken via email, and he'll be able to get back to you via email very, very soon. So Ken, here's a question from the floor. Looks like this gentleman is considering moving his organization to a SaaS solution. Ken, can you talk about the primary factors to consider in moving from an on-premises solution to a SaaS solution? Is one necessarily better than the other in your estimation?
That is an absolutely great question. And when we talk to companies today, and we talk about the business challenges they have and how they're going to apply multi-carrier shipping systems to solve those problems, I will tell you that question comes up every single time, but it's interesting when it comes up. It always comes up at the end of the process, right? And I think there's a reason for that, and it's actually a great reason, is that we focus on what the business problem is first, not actually the technological footprint that's required to do it. So frankly, I guess my way of saying is it really doesn't matter, but there are considerations, all right? So let's talk about briefly to answer the question as to what those considerations are, right? Depending on the structure of your organization, and what I mean by that is what does your warehouse distribution network look like? How are you, what kind of processing systems do you have in place? There's a phrase that says, I can't print a label in the cloud. Well, that's true, but you can generate it in the cloud and print it locally. But if you're doing 80,000 shipments an hour, you may want to have on-premise label printing, but there's no reason why you can't put the actual shipping system in the cloud. So here's the key. For us, we don't care if the system is going to be on-premise or in the cloud, or what I refer to as hybrid, where you put certain components on-premise or in the cloud. It really doesn't matter from a technology solution perspective. We have to evaluate what your organization's core capabilities are. If it's not a core competence of your IT organization, outsource that. If it is, and you've got a very highly integrated warehouse, then insource that, right? What I can say is the trend in our industry, logistics was slower to adopt cloud-based applications than some of the other segments, but is now absolutely moving quicker and quicker. And I would say that we've witnessed is probably, I would say right now, maybe 1 in 5 have a definite strategy to cloud. 3 in 5 are agnostic, not sure, and they find out through evaluation of the business decision, and 1 in 5 is keeping it on-premise.
Sure. Makes a lot of sense. Here's a couple questions we're rolling in. It looks like these folks are, just in the beginning stages of getting up and running with an online store. And this one specific question kind of caught my eye. Ken, our company is planning to launch an online store by mid-2019, and we're analyzing whether our existing system will be able to absorb the new shipping requirements. Great question. Do you have any advice as to top factors to consider? Seems like a pretty typical situation. Any advice or factors to consider when this group is moving to this situation?
Yeah, actually lots, but let's focus on the fact that we're online with the webinar today, and I hope this company and individual gets an opportunity to email me afterwards as well. But let me make an assumption, because there's a big difference whether you or not you're a smaller organization going into an online store approach, or if you're a big organization, global distributor that's about to try to do it for the first time. And right. we have absolutely seen both. So let me focus on a couple of key things that I think apply to both. Never, ever try to do it as a big bang approach, right? We've seen too many companies that have said, I want to go live in all my locations worldwide, in all my countries. When companies do that, they've just bitten off way more than they can chew. It won't be a technology reason, because of the other things I think you need to consider, right? Not just shipping systems, but are you prepared for it from a warehouse management perspective? How will your fulfillment processes change, right? How will you work with your stores? How do the purchasing processes interface with WMS and shipping systems? Have you thought all that through? And if you've done it, then do it in a small test market first to ensure everything's integrated, and then take a look at the big bang approach with respect to rollout. Yep. So given it's a little hard to focus on who this particular client is, I would say hopefully they follow up with me, and then as we learn a little bit more about them, we can expand on those, but those are kind of my guiding rules of principle, or my guiding principle.
Great advice and great insight there, right? One step at a time, but you really have to understand, this organization's needs. And we're going to have to wrap it up. Ken, we're up against the clock. I'll just say this is the last question. Again, we do have a number of questions here rolling in. Again, we're going to capture all those questions that are coming in now, move them over to Ken. So, Ken, just to wrap things up, but we hear a lot about the global customer, right? And you had touched base on that fact that you're in the Netherlands, you're doing a lot of work over in the EU. Is this a trend that you're seeing, or is it hype? That's a great question.
Oh, it's definitely not hype. I say I live in the Netherlands. I really live in a plane, right? But here's the thing, it's just the status of the world today, right? And I gave a couple of examples earlier that, we moved here from the United States. Part of it is because our company itself is becoming global in what we're doing. But we're responding to that hype. But let me kind of highlight it specific to the discussion today. The interesting thing is I'm going to steal a phrase from good old IBM, right? Act global, right? Think global, act local. Sorry, all right? And here's the thing that I'm highlighting on. Every carrier, every last mile distribution player that's out there is unique to every local market. Regardless of open borders and trade and movement of goods, there are different standards for compliance, different standards for moving goods across borders. And even within the EU, certain products that move across borders have certain documentation that has to be produced regardless of the fact that we're looking at a free trade market, right? So those processes differ per region. And so when companies say that they're going global and I want to use one system and one process, it never, ever works out that way. So the advice that I give organizations is look for the vendors that have a presence. Look for the vendors that's going to tell you that there's a difference in how to do multi-carrier shipping in America versus Europe versus Asia Pacific. They understand those nuances. And I'm not just talking about being able to produce a label in kanji when shipping in Japan, right? Right. You should be able to do that. Right. But do you understand the differences in working with carriers in Japan versus carriers in China versus carriers across Europe and North America? They are different and behave differently. And even the global carriers that are the big names we all recognize in different markets, they work and behave differently and have different business requirements of how we work with them. So don't assume that one fits all. And so, yes, the hype is there. People are responding to it. There's a complexity to it. And my advice is look for organizations that understand it to help you.
Outstanding. Great advice, Ken. Well, Ken Fleming, COO of Logistyx Technologies, great job today. You shined a lot of great light on some issues I think a lot of folks are just trying to put into perspective, put into context, especially in light of their current situation right now with all this complexity they're facing. So I want to thank you, Ken. Wonderful job. And I want to thank everybody who attended today. Again, we've got a lot of great questions, but we're up against the clock here, so we have to wrap things up. We're going to be capturing those questions, moving them over to Ken Ken. He'll get back to you as soon as possible. Well, Ken, great job, my friend. Well done. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Michael. It was a pleasure to meet with everybody today, and I look forward to following up on those additional questions.
Outstanding, and thanks for everybody attending. Have a great day. Thank you.